It was meant to be her private escape, her summer sanctuary, but instead, Camilla arrived to locked gates and a legal blockade that sent shockwaves through the monarchy. Why would Princess Anne go this far? And what secrets lay behind the sealed wing of Sandringham? The truth is darker and more personal than anyone could have imagined. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Sandringham has long stood as more than just a royal estate. It's a symbol of continuity, of tradition, and of the deeply personal ties that bind the crown to its past. Tucked away in Norfolk's quiet countryside, this residence served as Queen Elizabeth's favoured winter retreat and became, over decades, a sacred space of comfort and family memories. Camilla, since her rise within the royal ranks, had come to view this estate as a place of refuge too. Her annual summer stay, often kept out of the public eye, had become a private tradition, a time to exhale, away from London's harsh spotlight. And yet, this year, everything changed. What was supposed to be a familiar return turned into an unprecedented lockout. Staff were stunned, security scrambled, and Camilla herself was left waiting outside a gate she once entered freely. Just days before her arrival, legal documents had been quietly filed. They bore the insignia of the crown, but more crucially, the distinct legal stamp of Princess Anne's private legal team. No press release, no internal memo, just an irreversible seal, one that closed off the entire eastern wing of Sandringham with immediate effect. Camilla's name wasn't even on the clearance list. Rumours spread like wildfire within palace walls. Had Anne really gone this far? And if so, why now? Eyewitnesses confirmed seeing Sir Alistair Harwin, Anne's discreet but powerful lawyer, exiting the estate's private driveway documents in hand, accompanied by a member of the Queen's old security detail. Whatever had been signed, it wasn't temporary. It was a message. Camilla, used to wielding quiet influence, was blindsided. She had long believed her position as Queen Consort entitled her to the full privileges once afforded to Queen Elizabeth. But what she overlooked was that Sandringham was never just a crown estate. It was a battlefield of royal sentiment, of personal ownership, hidden under layers of protocol. And Anne, fiercely protective of her mother's memory and her own claim to that sacred ground, had been preparing for this confrontation in silence. She waited. She watched. And when Camilla crossed the line, Anne acted. No press conference, no warning, just a legal seal, an iron gate, and a statement that could not be ignored. Inside those sealed walls lies more than history. It holds secrets, handwritten letters, private correspondence, and echoes of promises made in confidence. But the lockout wasn't only physical, it was psychological. Anne wasn't just cutting Camilla off from a building, she was cutting her out of a legacy. One rooted in Queen Elizabeth's trust, Princess Margaret's discretion, and Anne's unspoken vow to protect it all. And as the days passed, the silence from Buckingham Palace became louder than any official statement. Charles remained quiet, his aides evasive. Camilla remained isolated. But to understand why Princess Anne made such a cold and calculated move, we must journey back to the whispered betrayal that started it all. Years ago, a pact was made in confidence, one that even Queen Elizabeth supposedly blessed. It centered on Sandringham, legacy, and loyalty. But when Camilla stepped across that invisible boundary, she unknowingly reignited an ancient royal grudge. The origins of this silent war trace back to a private understanding, a pact forged not in public view, but in the solemn privacy of Windsor's inner chambers. Queen Elizabeth, alongside Prince Philip, had once assured Princess Anne that Sandringham's eastern wing, a part of the estate deeply tied to their family lineage, would one day pass into her safekeeping. It was never formally documented in the public eye, but the understanding was clear among those who mattered. Anne, the ever-loyal daughter, the royal with iron resolve, had earned it. It was her inheritance of trust, a symbolic gift for her decades of unwavering service without scandal or demand. Yet as Camilla grew in influence, so too did her quiet sense of entitlement. Over the years, she made subtle but deliberate efforts to plant herself deeper into Sandringham's rhythm. A new set of furnishings here, a private garden there, redecorated rooms bearing her taste instead of the estate's heritage. It wasn't immediate, it was incremental, calculated. She never asked permission. She didn't need to. As queen consort, she assumed her presence alone was justification enough. But Anne noticed, and she remembered. At first, it was dismissed as harmless overreach. But then came the summer dinners where Camilla's guests began replacing familiar faces. The whispered suggestions of modernizing unused spaces. The unnerving sense that Camilla viewed Sandringham not as a shared sanctuary, but as a prize she had won. What brewed beneath the surface was not open confrontation, but a quiet storm of cold shoulders, loaded silences, and veiled remarks. Charles, ever the mediator, did little to intervene. Perhaps he underestimated how deeply personal Sandringham was to Anne. Or perhaps he believed Camilla's presence would fade into acceptance, as it had in so many other parts of the monarchy. But Anne is not like the others. Her memory is long, her patience exacting, and she kept records, notes, letters, fragments of conversations. Among them, one diary entry stood out, written in her sharp, unmistakable hand. The line has been crossed, beyond repair. She may wear the crown, but she will not touch this house again. The shift in Anne's demeanor became palpable. While the world remained distracted by coronations and titles, she began quietly consulting with her legal advisor, restoring old estate files, and revisiting decades-old correspondences with her mother. She wasn't acting in haste. She was building a case not in a court of law, but in the court of legacy. Because in her eyes, Camilla hadn't simply overstepped a boundary of property. She had challenged the very essence of loyalty. And in the royal family, betrayal of legacy is a sin far graver than any public scandal. But this wasn't just about real estate, this was about legacy, bloodlines, and a royal sisterhood unraveling beneath the surface. Behind palace doors, it wasn't just Anne who bristled at Camilla's growing control. Whispers among the staff revealed years of tension, disrespect, and one chilling moment that pushed them to quietly align with Anne. Sandringham may wear the mask of stately tradition, but inside its walls, loyalties are tested not through declarations, but through silence, glances, and withheld obedience. Long-standing staff members, some of whom had served under Queen Elizabeth herself, began to notice a shift not only in who occupied the estate, but in how they behaved within it. Camilla's presence was no longer that of a guest. She operated as if she ruled, not just by title, but by unspoken command. Her aides allegedly began referring to the Eastern Wing as her personal space, a claim that didn't sit well with those who remembered the Queen's unspoken wishes about Anne's future stewardship. One former butler, who had remained anonymous for decades, recalled an unsettling order. Camilla's decorators had been instructed to freshen up Anne's private quarters without notice or approval. Walls were repainted, drapes replaced, and heirloom furnishings subtly removed under the guise of modernization. When confronted, Camilla's staff allegedly responded with a casual, "Her Majesty wants a more welcoming atmosphere." That phrase, Her Majesty, cut deep, because in that moment, it became clear that Camilla's ascension wasn't merely ceremonial. She was rewriting territorial lines under royal titles. But the staff remembered their loyalties, and they began to rebel. Not loudly, but in carefully calculated ways. Tea trays arrived late. Flowers were intentionally mismatched. Requests from Camilla's circle, especially those related to the Eastern Wing, began to be declined with the kind of polite excuses only seasoned palace insiders could master. Then came the moment that changed everything. A phone recording, allegedly captured during a private call Camilla believed was secure, was quietly passed among the inner Sandringham staff. In it, Camilla is heard referring to Anne as the old relic clinging to corners no one cares about. The comment was short, careless, but devastating. For those who had seen Anne carry the burdens of royalty with relentless devotion, it was the ultimate betrayal. The recording reached Anne's head of household, a man who had served 3 royal generations with stoic loyalty, and instead of brushing it off, he took action. He compiled documents, records of changes made without Anne's consent, staff grievances, internal communications, and passed them, quietly and without ceremony, to Anne's legal team. This wasn't just about one insult. It was about a slow erosion of boundaries, a calculated effort to diminish Anne's presence within the only estate she still felt wholly tied to. The staff, once neutral observers, had now become quiet soldiers in a silent war. Their allegiance had shifted not because Anne asked for it, but because Camilla, in her pursuit of dominance, had gone too far. And just when Anne began gathering silent allies within the estate, a secret summer guest list changed everything. An encrypted guest list intercepted by Anne's team revealed something more explosive than protocol breaches. It hinted at a growing alliance between Camilla and individuals Anne had sworn never to trust, and at least one name sent Anne directly to her legal team. What began as routine monitoring of palace schedules escalated into a quiet panic among Anne's closest aides. A draft itinerary, digitally watermarked and unintentionally shared to a wrong internal email thread, exposed Camilla's intentions for her upcoming Sandringham visit. It wasn't the names of friends or extended family that sparked concern, it was the inclusion of outsiders, strangers to the crown. One, in particular, stood out like a flare in the dark, a disgraced former tabloid editor, long associated with the most brutal media campaigns against Anne and her siblings during the 1990s. This man wasn't just a footnote in royal history, he was a saboteur who once publicly humiliated the late Queen by publishing confidential estate records. Alongside his name appeared another, an international property magnate, whose wealth was matched only by the controversy that followed him. Known for spearheading aggressive private restoration projects, this individual had previously been linked to rumours of purchasing historical British landmarks under the guise of conservation. Anne had heard the whispers. There had been quiet attempts to fundraise for a so-called Royal Restoration Trust, one that allegedly proposed transforming unused wings of Sandringham into exclusive venues for high-paying clients. It was a betrayal so profound, so brazen, that it left Anne momentarily speechless. To her, the estate was sacred, an ancestral vessel of royal legacy and emotional grounding. The idea of Camilla entertaining discussions about monetizing parts of it with outsiders was not only disrespectful, it was unforgivable. Anne confronted Charles behind closed doors, demanding answers. But what she received instead was silence, cold, calculated, political silence. Charles, caught between his wife and his sister, refused to condemn the guest list. He dismissed it as exploratory and denied any formal agreements had been made. But to Anne, the damage had already been done. The very consideration of involving such figures on royal land, especially without her knowledge, was the final straw. Diplomacy had failed. Her voice had been dismissed, her warnings ignored. And now, she understood that waiting for permission would only lead to more betrayal. So, while Camilla continued planning her lavish summer, Anne shifted her focus to a different kind of preparation, one that didn't require headlines, confrontation, or approval. She summoned her legal counsel, presented the intercepted documents, and asked a single question. Can I protect it on my own? The answer, sealed in centuries-old estate clauses and constitutional loopholes, was yes. And that's when the real war began. When diplomacy failed, Princess Anne decided to wage her own quiet war, one signature at a time. In a move as swift as it was symbolic, Anne's longtime legal advisor descended on Sandringham with an official court seal. By the time Camilla's security detail arrived, access was revoked, locks were changed, and history had been rewritten. Sir Alistair Harwin, a name rarely seen in the press but known within elite legal circles for his quiet efficiency and unwavering loyalty to the crown, had been working behind closed doors for weeks. Acting on Anne's instruction and backed by decades-old documents, Harwin executed a legal maneuver few knew even existed. It was a strategy rooted in tradition, yet devastating in its modern implications. The clause he invoked was buried deep within the estate's archives, an ancestral rights preservation protocol that allowed a senior royal, under specific criteria, to restrict access to sections of family land deemed historically sensitive. It had not been activated since 1954. Until now. The grounds for invocation were carefully chosen: undue risk to historical artifacts, unauthorized alterations to protected interiors, and violations of internal custodial agreements first established by King George VI. But the true weight of the decision came from a historical codicil, dated 1936, one quietly amended by Queen Elizabeth following her coronation, which granted Anne, as the monarch's only daughter, limited authority over privately held estate sections should she perceive a threat to their symbolic integrity. Camilla's ambitions had unintentionally crossed a threshold. Anne had every legal right to guard, and now the gates were shut. Within hours of the filing, notices were posted. Access restricted by royal order, preservation zone enforced under private trusteeship. It was an elegant way of saying, "You are no longer welcome here." Camilla's aides, arriving with luggage and decorators in tow, were turned away at the side entrance. One attempted to call palace security for override clearance, but no override came. Not from Charles. Not from anyone. Even Camilla's most senior household staff, some of whom had never known a day without full access, were left humiliated and stranded outside what had once been considered a sanctuary. The optics were disastrous, and just as planned, they spread. Leaks from within the Royal Communications Office erupted like cracks in a dam. One insider described the mood as absolute chaos. Phones rang off the hook. Requests for comment were met with silence or vague assurances that the situation was being looked into. But it was already too late. The damage was done not just in policy, but in pride. Anne had made her statement without a word. No press conference, no confrontation, only parchment, signatures, and a sealed gate. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone inside the firm. For Anne, it was about protection. For Camilla, it was about power. And in that moment, she had been outplayed publicly, legally, and decisively. But behind the scenes, this wasn't just about property. It was a cold message delivered from one royal woman to another. And it hit Camilla harder than anyone expected. Sources say the Queen Consort did not take the move lightly. In fact, what unfolded inside her private quarters that night revealed a woman spiraling torn between fury, fear, and a deepening paranoia that Anne had declared a silent coup. The moment confirmation came through that the eastern wing of Sandringham had been legally sealed, Camilla reportedly collapsed into a rage unlike anything her staff had ever witnessed. The finality of the action wasn't just a legal blow, it was a personal humiliation, inflicted not by an institution, but by a family member she had underestimated. For years, Camilla had maneuvered quietly, subtly absorbing roles, spaces, and influence. But Anne had drawn a line in granite, and the Queen Consort, accustomed to control, cloaked in charm, was left exposed, cornered, and shaken. Inside her private suite, aides heard raised voices, shattered glass, and a heated confrontation that would later be whispered about in the halls of Clarence House and beyond. Camilla, already under pressure from a divided public and a family still fractured by the past, turned her fury toward the one person she believed had failed to shield her: King Charles. She accused him, reportedly through clenched teeth, of always siding with Anne when it counts, and demanded to know why he hadn't blocked the legal seal or at least issued a public correction. But Charles, weary and increasingly caught in the crossfire of old loyalties and new alliances, refused to take sides. His silence was read as complicity, and in that silence, Camilla unraveled. It was during this episode that the now infamous quote first surfaced, overheard by a palace staffer standing outside the chamber door. Through tears and fury, Camilla had cried, "She's trying to erase me while I'm still alive." It was less an accusation and more a confession, a moment of raw vulnerability that laid bare her deepest fear. That Anne's move wasn't just about estate access, but about succession, legacy, and removing Camilla from the center of royal power, piece by piece. That night, she made a frantic call to her personal security advisor, reportedly ordering a full review of Anne's legal authority and demanding intel on what might come next. But what haunted her most wasn't the paperwork. It was the realization that Anne's strike had been surgical, silent, and successful. Camilla had been outplayed, not in public, but behind palace curtains where real power lives and dies without a headline. Charles, caught in the eye of this storm, withdrew further into himself. Those close to him say he was visibly rattled, torn between a wife he had defended through scandal and a sister whose quiet strength was beginning to cast a longer, colder shadow. The fracture wasn't just emotional, it was constitutional, because in a monarchy where perception is power, Camilla's image had just suffered a blow from which recovery seemed uncertain. And while Camilla unraveled in private, Anne was already preparing her next, quieter move, one that would shift future power forever. As the palace scrambled to manage the fallout, Princess Anne bypassed traditional channels and sent a sealed envelope to the Privy Council, a letter that questioned roles, legacies, and who would control the future stewardship of royal estates. The message was quiet but seismic. In an institution where everything passes through protocol, Anne's decision to go directly to the council signaled that she was no longer playing within the constraints of ceremonial hierarchy. She was invoking the raw authority of history. The letter, hand-delivered and marked private constitutional inquiry, was said to reference an obscure but potent clause within the Royal Estates Act, allowing senior royals to petition the Privy Council for a re-examination of estate management structures during times of internal crisis. And Anne made her case not just through law, but lineage. Inside the document, she reportedly cited Queen Elizabeth's own written reflections, notes taken during her late reign, that emphasized the Crown's duty to preserve private royal properties in line with tradition and personal service, not merely title. Anne argued that Sandringham, unlike other holdings, had always been more personal than political. It had belonged not to the role of monarch, but to the memory of family. She proposed a revision to the stewardship structure, suggesting a permanent trust led by a panel of historically vetted custodians, ones with no political ambition and no marital links to the current line of succession. In doing so, she subtly but unmistakably removed Camilla from the equation. The trust would protect the estate from modern influence, she wrote, and ensure that its soul was guarded by those who had earned its respect, not simply inherited its access. The language was calm, measured, but surgical. Anne didn't need to name Camilla. Her omission spoke louder than any direct attack. And while Camilla was left out entirely, the proposal hinted at inclusion for others who had, like Anne, dedicated their lives to the quiet endurance of duty. Princess Alexandra, Lady Sarah Chatto, even the Duke of Edinburgh's former archivist. The letter stirred quiet unrest. Inside the Privy Council, members debated for hours behind closed doors. Some saw Anne's move as a bold step toward meritocratic legacy. Others viewed it as a dangerous precedent, one that risked undermining the Crown's united front. But regardless of where they stood, one truth became undeniable. Anne was reshaping the monarchy's internal architecture with every move she made, and she was doing it with the precision of someone who had studied the battlefield her entire life. Outside those stone walls, whispers spread. Had Anne just triggered a succession of structural changes that would echo for decades? Was the monarchy about to become a family divided not by scandal, but by constitutional rebellion? But just as Anne's power play began gaining momentum, a mysterious figure emerged from the shadows, one with a grudge and a voice Camilla could use. She had vanished from royal affairs for years, but now, at Camilla's lowest point, a former royal insider returned with a message. Anne isn't the only one who knows how to fight. What followed was a whisper campaign that left the monarchy shaken. Her name was Lady Felicity Gainsborough, once a notorious confidant of Princess Margaret, whispered about in corridors for her unmatched ability to manipulate favour within the royal court without ever holding an official position. For over a decade, she had remained silent, living quietly in a Sussex manor, dismissed by most as a relic of the past. But to Camilla, she was exactly the weapon she needed, sharp, unencumbered by protocol, and fueled by long-held resentment toward Princess Anne, who had reportedly shut Felicity out during the final years of Margaret's life. That wound, it seemed, had never healed. Within days of her return to the fold, Felicity began planting seeds of discord. Letters, decades old, mysteriously resurfaced, some allegedly written by Queen Elizabeth in moments of doubt about the future of estate control. Others, claimed to be from Prince Philip, hinted at Anne's stubbornness as a potential liability. Though their authenticity was never officially verified, the damage was in the doubt they created. And then came the photographs, grainy, time-stamped, but unmistakably damning. One showed Anne holding an unauthorized estate meeting during a royal mourning period. Another captured a younger Anne reportedly entertaining a businessman, later tied to a failed royal development deal. Neither was criminal. But in the court of perception, they chipped away at the stoic armor Anne had long worn. Felicity wasn't just exposing past indiscretions, she was activating old networks. She hosted private dinners with senior aristocrats, many of whom felt increasingly sidelined by Anne's no-nonsense leadership style. With charm and venom in equal measure, she painted Anne's legal maneuvers not as protective, but as authoritarian. Whispers began to spread of a monarch-in-waiting complex, suggesting Anne was consolidating influence not for preservation, but for quiet control. Even Charles, already wearied by the storm, began to hear rumblings of discontent from those he once considered allies. Felicity's strategy was not brute force, it was psychological erosion, and Camilla watched as her confidence slowly returned. An underground resistance of sorts began to take shape within palace walls, not overt, not organized, but present. Staff grew more cautious, some siding with Camilla out of sympathy, others out of fear that Anne's growing power would render their roles obsolete. A rift was forming, not between monarch and subject, but between two factions of royalty, each claiming to protect the crown in their own way. For Camilla, it was a fragile resurgence, fueled by desperation and the careful choreography of an ally who knew exactly where the pressure points were buried. But even as this covert alliance worked to destabilize Anne's grip, they failed to see that the Princess Royal had been holding back one final move reserved, devastating, and utterly irreversible. But just as Camilla clutched at her final lifelines, Anne unveiled one final move, one that no one saw coming, and that would seal the Sandringham battle for good. It ended with a pen stroke. After months of subtle power plays, Princess Anne filed an irrevocable deed, one that made her control over Sandringham's eastern wing permanent and untouchable, even by the reigning monarch. Camilla had officially lost. The final move wasn't grand or theatrical, it was methodical, precise, and executed with all the force of royal history behind it. Anne's legal team, led by the tireless Sir Alistair Harwin, drafted the deed in the form of a public trust designed to protect the estate for generations to come. The clause at its heart was a masterstroke, a multi-generational conservation agreement that barred any future sovereign, including King Charles, from altering the status or structure of the Eastern Wing without unanimous consent from the Trust's lifetime stewards, all handpicked by Anne. It was a legal fortress, one no crown could penetrate. The signing itself was witnessed by two senior royals, Princess Alexandra and the Duke of Gloucester, along with a retired High Court judge who had once served as an advisor to Queen Elizabeth. Every detail was orchestrated with intent. This wasn't simply a property document, it was a statement of permanence. Camilla, upon hearing of the filing, made a final, desperate plea to Charles. She urged him to intervene, to revoke the deed or delay the filing. But Charles, worn down and politically boxed in, said nothing. His silence was the final betrayal. Without his support, Camilla's influence collapsed like a house of cards. There would be no reversal, no press briefing, not even a public word in her defense. Anne's office, when approached for comment, issued only 6 words. Media outlets erupted in a frenzy. Legal experts flooded the airwaves, confirming what insiders already knew: Camilla had no legal recourse. The document was airtight, and it was permanent. For the first time in her tenure as Queen Consort, Camilla was publicly outmaneuvered, and the message was not lost on the monarchy's inner circle. Anne had drawn a line not just through Sandringham, but through the heart of royal hierarchy. The era of silent endurance had ended. A new power had emerged, not loud, not crowned, but unshakable. But this was never about land alone. It was about legacy, control, the right to define what endures and what fades. And in that moment, with one final signature, Anne rewrote the future. She did not need the throne to wield power, she had simply claimed something greater, authority born of service, not ceremony. And this deed, irrevocable and final, was only the beginning of her strategic rise. As the gates of Sandringham remain sealed and Camilla retreats into the shadows, one question echoes through the palace halls. With the monarchy fractured and public loyalties shifting, the battle at Sandringham may be over, but the war for the future of the crown has just begun. And in that war, silence may be deadlier than scandal. Anne's victory ignited something unexpected, a wave of support from the public. While royal tradition had always favoured quiet deference to titles, Anne's act of guardianship struck a different chord. She wasn't seizing power, she was protecting heritage. Newspapers, once neutral, now carried headlines praising her resolve. Polls showed a spike in favourability. And slowly, a narrative emerged. Anne, not Camilla, had become the de facto steward of the late Queen's legacy. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Camilla's supporters, though diminished, did not vanish. Instead, they began pushing back from behind closed doors, fearful that what happened at Sandringham was a warning of more exclusions to come. Questions arose over other properties: Balmoral, Windsor, Clarence House. Was Anne drawing boundaries beyond just one estate? Inside the palace, Catherine's quiet but unmistakable alignment with Anne only fueled speculation. The two women, once thought to inhabit separate orbits within the firm, now appeared to share an unspoken alliance. Catherine's grace, Anne's grit, it was a combination that unsettled many, particularly those still loyal to the older guard. Rumours swirled of late-night strategy meetings, of future succession roles being quietly negotiated outside official channels. Meanwhile, lines began to form. Those who embraced Anne's preservationist stance were dubbed the Guardians. Those who still championed modernization, shorthand for Camilla's vision, found themselves outnumbered, isolated. Even Charles, once the great mediator, began fading into the background, letting the tides reshape themselves. Inside those stone walls, a quiet reckoning was unfolding. No speeches, no declarations, just movements, glances, and decisions with irreversible weight. The monarchy, once a unified front, was now a house divided between those who honoured the past and those who believed it should evolve or be left behind. And still, whispers continued. Some said Anne was preparing for a greater role, unofficial, yet influential. One she would never ask for, yet could no longer avoid. She had the trust of the people, the loyalty of the estates, and the quiet nod of approval from the one woman who mattered most, Queen Elizabeth, whose values Anne was now defending with relentless resolve. And though she would never wear the crown, some dared to ask the forbidden question. Is this the beginning of Queen Anne's era in everything but name? And with each sealed door and hidden document, one truth becomes clear: the monarchy's future is no longer decided by kings alone. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.